eventually they will have to make a decision as to whether the material which they've put together they believe is sufficient to put before a jury. And if they believe it is, he should be charged and taken before a court. And if they believe it isn't, that should be the end of the matter.
Thames Valley Police say that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has been released under investigation. It's understood officers will later today resume searches at Royal Lodge, his former home in Berkshire. Let's look at what may happen next in terms of the investigation and the next steps for the police and potentially prosecutors. Wendy Joseph KC is a former Old Bailey judge. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
First of all, can you explain to us about the offence of misconduct in public office? How is it defined?
Well, that's a good question, Chloe. It's important to understand it isn't a statutory offence. It's not like the stuff we get normally, like theft or rape or burglary, where you can go to an Act of Parliament and see all the elements laid out. It isn't like that. It's a thing called a common law offence, which means it's emerged over a very long period of time, and the law relating to it has been developed by the courts themselves, the higher courts of this country. And the way it stands at the moment is quite complicated. It requires, firstly, that the wrongdoer is a public officer. Is there a definition of public officer? I'm afraid there isn't. You've got to look at the various authorities and draw from them the sort of thing that might be covered. Being a trade envoy might be covered. Being a member of the royal family will not of itself be sufficient. It's the status of being a trade envoy that will be examined here. Then the next thing is that while you're acting as a public officer, you must have misconducted yourself, done something wrong. That act of doing something wrong must be what the law calls willful, which in plain old English means deliberate. And at the time you are deliberately doing that act, you must be, you must in effect intend to do the act, or you must at least be willfully reckless as to whether you're doing the act or not, deliberately doing a wrongful act or not, deliberately closing your eyes to whether it's wrong or not. So, in essence, as a public officer, you must be doing something you know or very strongly suspect is a wrong thing to do. And it must be so serious that it in effect undermines or is an abuse of public trust in you as that officer, and you must have no reasonable excuse or justification. So you see, it's quite a complex thing to set about proving.
I noticed that a report from the Law Commission 6 years ago, which advises ministers, said the offence was one of the most notoriously difficult to define in England and Wales. So presumably this makes this investigation even more challenging when it is difficult to define for reasons you've just outlined.
Yeah, I mean, in essence, it's the real test of our jury system. And it's quite interesting that it's arisen. Of course, he hasn't been charged with anything yet, never mind being tried for anything. But were that to come about, it will be a very interesting test of our jury system at a time when our jury system is under a bit of a threat. So it's interesting times that we live in.
So with regards Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, he has now been released. So what are the options open to the police now?
Well, the options they had last night were to charge him, and they clearly didn't believe they had sufficient evidence to actually charge him, or release him on police bail, which might have involved conditions of residence and various other conditions, or to do what they have actually done, which is to release him under investigation, which means he has no fixed date for return. In the old days when we were allowed to use Latin, it was called sine die, without a date to return on. And it allows them to go on investigating him. You may remember we used to always release people under police bail, and then there was a lot of complaints about how long people were being left on police bail. And so this course, releasing someone under investigation, is very common now in complicated matters.
And so if the police were to decide to take this further, would they have to rearrest Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor?
Yeah, I mean, they may call him back for further interview, under arrest or not, at any stage. If they do call him back for further interview, it's quite likely it will be under arrest. And then eventually they will have to make a decision as to whether the material which they've put together they believe is sufficient to put before a jury. And if they believe it is, he should be charged and taken before a court. And if they believe it isn't, that should be the end of the matter.
And you mentioned there about people being released on bail, and there's been criticism in the past about how long people can be on bail, and that's obviously not the situation that Prince Andrew's under. He has been released under further investigation. Would he be notified if that investigation ended? Does the police have to tell you that it has ended? Because I can imagine that is something that, as somebody who has been arrested but there have been no charges, you would want to know if the investigation is ongoing or if the legal process has reached the end.
Yeah, I could not believe that they would not tell him that they were no longer investigating if that were the true state of affairs. But there are two things to bear in mind. One is there is no time limit on how long you can be left under investigation. So their continued examination of the situation could last for a very long time. The second thing to remember is they could tell him that it's all over. Thank you, sir. It's been a pleasure meeting you. Goodbye. There'd be nothing stopping them reopening that investigation in due course. And we are all at the mercy of what may emerge from America in the course of investigations over there into the Epstein position. So it's a long trail that Mr. Epstein's left behind him.
And it's interesting you mentioned about timeframes, because I wanted to ask you about that. You say this could go on a very long time. I mean, not least because obviously you've already outlined how difficult it is to define the offence of misconduct in public office. But also we understand there's going to be further searches carried on today at his former property at Royal Lodge. Obviously, there have also been searches in Norfolk. Presumably, a huge amount of evidence also leads to the length of time it can take for an investigation.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose one of the problems is in some ways they know what they're looking for, and in some ways they don't. They just don't know what they're going to find. And the properties that are being searched, I mean, it's not like you're one up, one down. These are large properties, and they will be looking, in addition for physical evidence, they will be looking for material that may be stored in other places, online, in the cloud, on computers. So there's a lot to be examined here. On the other hand, they will be very conscious of the effect of all of this on the public. A lot of people are, involved in this, and they will be working very hard to try and put themselves in a position where they can make sensible decisions. When I say they, I mean the prosecuting authority will in reality be the CPS, based upon the evidence which has been collected and collated by the police.
One final question I wanted to ask you. You mentioned one of the decisions which will have to be made by the authorities is whether the trade envoy role of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor was indeed a public office, a public role. Is there a difference legally between being appointed by the Queen, as Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor was, and being appointed by the government?
Search me, Chloe. I don't think there's a clear answer to that. One of the problems is there is no actual definition of what is being in a public office. I can tell you the sort of people who have been found to have been in a public office or not, and they would include judges, police officers, elected officials, army officers, bishops, Amongst those who have been found not to be in a public office, I think, are paramedics. So they need to look at exactly what the position is. But ultimately, if there is no definition, a jury, should there ever be one, will be told, you must be satisfied so that you are sure that he was in a public office, that he was a public officer. And it will be a matter for them to make the decision.
Really interesting to speak to you this morning. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Thank you. That is Wendy Joseph KC, a former Old Bailey judge.
Really fascinating to hear that. And one of the things that will, become even more clear over the next few weeks and months is Britain's unwritten constitution, all those grey areas where what is, ministers are ministers of the crown. So they act in accordance with the wishes of the monarchy in theory, but of course they're appointed by the Prime Minister and he's elected or she's elected in the case of Conservatives because they are the leader of the party that's won most votes in a general election. All kinds of complicated things going to be thrown up and pondered, and the world will be watching.